One of the books of work that we offer is called Air Monitoring, which is really just kind of a little more of a scientific version of a blue canary or a yellow canary, really whatever. We all come from a first responder background. So what we're going to be doing here is just using different mediums in order to kind of verify a pollutant in the air and provide that for our customers so they understand how to keep their workers safe. The purpose of overall air monitoring is measuring the allowable limits for a known contaminant inside of an environment. A good example here would be like a spray booth for painting. We would be monitoring for the clear coating chemical, the repellent for the paint, things like that, and then submitting them to a lab for analysis to ensure that whatever's in the air is below the permissible exposure limits. This can help bolster a respiratory protection plan or verify if there's one needed in place. It can also verify if like exhaust mechanisms, so like an exhaust hood is functioning as intended for just kind of continued testing. There's a lot of different kinds of equipment that are going to be used here. Even in this test, you can see that a person is wearing more than one kind of monitor there. So, if we're evaluating just kind of here, we've got one that's going to be monitoring a very specific contaminant, another one that's probably monitoring a second contaminant, and a third monitor that's monitoring a third contaminant. So one person can be monitoring multiple devices here, which we'll talk a little bit more in the future. But that's just some of the basics of just kind of the purpose of air monitoring and why we're there. Here's a list of all of the required equipment that you're going to need in order to complete an air monitoring job. First and foremost, you're going to want a laptop with a Wi-Fi connection. That's going to allow you to get to the digital chain of custody on the SGS Galson website, which is the final way that you kind of submit all of the different pieces of media that you collect throughout the work order there. And you're also going to be able to access any kind of a training video, the internet, anything in the tech portal that requires an online connection. So as always, the laptop is going to be a required piece of the work order here. This little guy sitting right there, that's an air pump. So that is what's going to be pumping air through the tubing that is situated on any of the collection media devices. So you're going to get to know those. This little hatch right here we'll talk about later, but that is a cover that covers the power switch and the calibration screw. So there's a screwdriver that's going to be provided in the kit, so just kind of keep that in mind that if you can't find the power switch, it's probably under that cover. The next picture over is going to be what the paper version of the chain of custody looks like, and that is a pretty big stack of paper. The actual chain of custody sheet is only 1 or 2 pages. The rest of it is going to be supplementary information or note-taking paper. Some of that can include the pump inventory sheet, a list of all of the kind of the flow rates, the different analytes that are being provided, or even just the different collection materials, as well as quick start guides for every different kind of media collection device that there is for air monitoring. And those are findable in 2 places, either the paper that is provided in the equipment that SGS Galson provides, or in the tech portal under the reference library in the technician manual folder. There is a folder in there that has a PDF copy of all of their quick start guides for all of the equipment. You can also visit their YouTube page, which is SGS Galson. They have videos that are old but still very well done that shows the setup and or calibration steps for any of the things that they use. So there's a number of different places that you can go to kind of find those. The main ones are going to be whatever's provided with the kit, the YouTube page for SGS Galson, or the tech portal under the reference library. The bottom 2 pictures there, so this canister and this canister, those are both different kinds of collection mediums for air monitoring. The right one would be a cassette and the left one would be an analyte, with the left being for isopropyl alcohol and the right one being for respirable dust. So all of the end goal for any of those monitors is the same. You're trying to collect a pollutant. It just can vary how that is accomplished. So this right one is what would hook up to the air pump. The left one is one that would just sit on someone's collar. And that's easy to figure out just by looking at the quick start guides that are provided with the materials. Next picture over is going to be a charger. So that is what charges the air pumps. Those have internal batteries. So the charger is a trickle style charger. It can charge, this particular one can charge up to 5 of the air pumps all at the same time. The biggest thing to note is those are trickle style chargers. It takes significantly longer to charge the batteries for an air pump. So that is one where you're going to want to put those onto a charger very early and let them charge for as long as possible, just because they do not charge quickly like the iPads do. The next picture over is a calibrator. That is one of the manual ones. There's a digital version as well. But this is how you would verify the flow rate of a pump. There's a small ball bearing at the bottom of the tube there. And as long as you read the equator line of that ball as it moves up or down the scale there, that is what you are going to learn your flow rates from. The last two are bags that you use when you're done with the job for all of the collected media. So the bag on the left is what you would use for anything that wasn't used or isn't going to be analyzed, whereas the bag on the right is specifically for any sample that needs analysis. And we'll talk about how to package those correctly in the future portion of this presentation here. But at least for the basics, this is going to be about what the equipment looks like. One thing to note here is SGS Galson, when they provide the kits to us, they all come in a number of like toolboxes and tackle boxes. The main responsibility there is just going to be inventorying it for completeness. So when we go to order those, pretty much everything that you're going to need minus the computer is going to come in that kit, up to and including a screwdriver for the tiny screw on the air pump. So pretty good vendor. We have a good relationship with them. When you're getting ready for an air monitoring job, one of the first things that you're going to want to do is to be familiar with what's called a sampling plan. The sampling plan comes from our industrial hygienist. That is going to provide you basically the how-tos of what the industrial hygienist is going to want to see out of the air monitoring job. So specifically, it's going to kind of give you the areas that need to be monitored. Where this is going to be very useful is if you show up on site and a client doesn't have the names of the people that are working, that are set to be wearing any of the analytes or cassettes or any of the medium collection devices, you can refer to the sampling plan, which will tell you an area of that business needing to be monitored. So in this case, the example would be paint booth. So then there, the point of contact should be able to identify a couple of the employees that are going to be working in that paint booth to be able to get you a couple of the names that we can set up our equipment on. You're also going to want to make sure that you start charging the air pumps. Like we just talked about, those are trickle chargers. They take significantly longer. They are supposed to come pre-charged. SGS Galson's direct statement on that is the pumps should be fine so long as they're used within 48 hours of the shipping date where the equipment was sent. But it's always better to be cautious. So as soon as you get the equipment, you're going to want to remove those pumps and start them charging on those trickle chargers. You should also be able to review any of the quick start guides that came with the equipment and just kind of familiarize yourself with the different collection mediums that are being sent to you. So if you're using, a wagon wheel style cassette and or an analyte or just one of the ones that is clipping onto a collar, you're familiar with what equipment that you're going to be using. So that kind of shortens the cycle up when you're actually going to set it up. And then you can start preparing the actual equipment away from the work site so that when setup day comes, things will just go faster. The last thing that you're going to do is print out enough of the collection data sheets to cover each one of the cassettes. This is going to be very similar to doing dosimetry. The actual data sheet works very similarly as far as creating the notes, and those can be found, I believe, in the reference library as well for air monitoring, which we'll talk about on the next slide or two here. When charging the pumps up with the trickle style chargers here, there can be a couple of different connections. Either one, these pumps will have an individual charger where they need to be plugged in all at one time, or you'll have kind of the multi 5-pump charger. Either one will work. So it might just be one plug, it might be a 5-pump charger, but most of the connections on the end are going to look like that, which just plugs directly into a port which is on the back of the actual pump. It is pretty easy to see exactly where it's going to plug in. There's an LED light on the charger face, so it would be sitting like right here on that piece of equipment. So what you're going to be looking for is either blinking or solid lights there. I believe amber is charging, red is fault, green is fully charged. Here's where you can find kind of the associated paperwork that you're going to need in order to either reference how to use one of the sampling collection devices or to where to find the sample collection data sheet. So following the pathway here, you're going to be going to the technical reference library for air monitoring survey, and then inside of that you're going to find that sheet that's being pointed to by the red arrow, this little guy here. That is your data sheet, and we'll take a look at that in a future slide, but that's where you're going to find the actual sheet to be printed out here. The other one that you're going to want to know about also is in the technical reference library. In air monitoring survey, there is a folder in there called the Galson training sheets, and each one of those file folders in this folder has each one of the different monitoring devices quick start guide. You would not necessarily need to be responsible to individually know how to look these up. Like I was saying earlier, inside of the tackle box that is provided by SGS Galson when a kit is sent out, those paper copies are sent with that kit. But as we all know, it's better to plan for a rainy day than be surprised by one. So if for some reason those sheets are not present, they've been misplaced, or they're illegible, we do have a digital copy as well, which can be found in that portion of the portal. Next, you'll be able to take a look at the chain of custody and pull each one of the different monitoring devices out. They're all kind of bagged by their similar nature. So like respirable dust is with respirable dust, carbon black is with carbon black, isopropyl is with isopropyl. You'll take each one of those and individually kind of lay them out. They all come with a serial number on it that is like, it's always in the same format of 25 hyphen and then a bunch of numbers, usually about 6 or 7. So you can line those up. I would line them up in numerical order just because it makes it a lot easier to sort through them later. So then what you'll end up doing is go through the paper chain of custody form and cross-reference with the equipment that you have on hand and just take an inventory. Take an inventory, sort them out. Then once those are all done, then we can prepare what's called a blank. A blank is what is used to serve as both a control and to verify any passive contaminants that might be in the setup room to be used as an exclusionary protocol for the other pieces of media. So one blank for every piece of media is prepared. So if we were preparing for an event that was testing isopropyl alcohol, carbon black, and respirable dust, then I would have a blank for respirable dust, carbon black, and isopropyl alcohol each. And you would do that for each sampling event. So if for some reason we were sampling over a 2 or 3 day period, then for each one of those I would have one blank each, or 3 blanks in total for the entire testing of that day. So it's one blank per day per media. Here we're going to take a look at SGS Galson's video on just kind of taking that initial inventory and just a few things to keep in mind when taking a look at the equipment for air monitoring.
Tip: when unpacking rental instruments, be sure to save all packing material, original shipping box, and return shipping material pouch. Unpack all equipment, keeping all shipping containers and packing material. These will be used to repack and ship everything back to the laboratory. Confirm you have all media and materials requested for your sampling event using the packing list provided. Make sure you keep pumps and their corresponding media together, and you know which media is used for each method. This can be done by matching the pump calibration sheet information with the label on the pumps themselves to see what pumps are to be used with what media. The labels on the pumps should match the information on the pump calibration sheets. That is, all pumps will have a label with the flow rate and type of media to be used. The media will be labeled as to what it is used for, so verify that you know what filters are to be used for what method. If the pumps have not been charged within the past 48 hours, you must recharge them prior to sampling. You may receive one of 3 different styles of pump charger. The simplest charger plugs into the wall and into the pump. The single PowerFlex charger plugs into the wall, then into the transformer, and then into the pump. The 5-station PowerFlex unit plugs into the wall and can charge up to 5 pumps at once. When using the simplest single-style charger, the light will illuminate on the charger when plugged in. Adjust the connection as needed until the light illuminates. This light will flash when the battery is fully charged. When using the single PowerFlex charger, the light near the port will illuminate red when plugged in. Adjust the connection as needed until the light illuminates. This light will change to green when the battery is fully charged and will remain in trickle charge mode until unplugged. When using the 5-station PowerFlex charger, the light near each port will illuminate red when plugged in. Adjust the connections as needed until the lights illuminate. These lights will change to green when the battery is fully charged and will remain in trickle charge mode until unplugged.
Questions? Contact SGS Galson by phone or IH live chat.
So one thing to note there was that was for the air check pump. Earlier we talked about a different brand. Again, they function overall the same. The only thing that would change would be how those electrical connections might go together. But again, as long as you understand the overall kind of underarching concept of what needs to happen, then you should be good to go. The video is pretty thorough as far as showing everything that needs to be unpacked and checked. One of the sheets that they pointed out there was the pump calibration data sheet, or the pump inventory screen. So just like in the video, what we're going to do is we're going to take our media collection devices, which have already been sorted into some, serialized number formatting, to just kind of put them in an order. And we're going to take the pumps which have your serial numbers on them. Some pumps will have 2 serial numbers. They do that because the battery is also serialized. So the one on the back bottom of the pump, in this case, the one that's pictured, would be for the battery. The actual serial number for the pump is on the side of the pump. So every once in a while, you're going to need to match the actual serial number up with the serial number that's on the sheet. So in this case, PG752, if you're not seeing that one, you're probably looking at the wrong serial number. But what we're going to do is take PG752 and we're going to match it with one of the PW PVC 2 pieces. So we're going to take that and match that to the actual material kind of collection on it. So you'll look at the cassette, match up that it's the same type, and then what we do in order to just kind of make things easier for the setup day is you take the last 3 serial numbers on the serial number and you just write it down on the pump sticker right there. So then when you actually have the testing day, you can take the cassette, easily find the pump that was calibrated specifically for it, and just attach them, and you're pretty much ready to go. So you'll want to do that for each one of the different pumps. So in this case, we've got 4 pumps that are on this sheet that need to be married with 4 cassettes for PW PVC 2 pieces. Each will be calibrated at 2 liters, which we'll talk about in a second here. And then once you've annotated the serial numbers that go on those pumps, then you're pretty much ready for the next step. Just a few notes. There are some collection devices or analytes that don't require a pump at all. They just passively sit on somebody's collar. So in this case, what is pictured is a monitor for isopropyl alcohol. On the back of that, you'll see that there was a QR code with a second serial device. We're going to want to write that one down. So if you see a small cassette that has both the serial number that should be written probably on the other side of this, as well as that QR code, we're going to refer to both of those and notate both serial numbers. The way that you can totally be sure of whether a pump is required or not is, again, just by referring to the quick start guide that should be provided with those different materials. So once we have all of our materials sorted, married to the pumps, and everything's been inventoried and we're pretty much ready, the next thing that we're going to do is prepare a blank sample for each one of the different collection mediums that we're testing for. And that needs to be per collection medium per day of testing. Usually that's just going to be one per, but if we're going to be there for multiple days, you need to have one blank per day. So a blank sample, what those are used for is they are a control mechanism. What they do is they allow the lab to rule out common contaminants that might have been found in the area where we set up. So when we go to set up, you're either going to want to be in some kind of a conference room, your hotel room, or like a known safe area that is not where you're going to be conducting the actual air monitoring test. So you essentially are going to be opening the cassette, the analyte, any of the collecting media that you have there, and letting it just briefly be exposed to air, closing it back up, labeling it as a blank, and then submitting that. And that is used as a control device. And we'll talk a little bit more about the specifics of how to do that here very shortly. So as we go to serialize all of the gear and prepare those blanks, just like with the naming convention of the serial numbers, one of the important things to add is that this is the blank for that specific collection media. So in this case, what we're doing is on the actual sticker, we are marking it as the blank and then bagging it for analysis with the other like ones. We're also on the paper chain of custody sheet going to be annotating that one as the blank as well. And as you can see, those serial numbers are going to be matching here. So we have 259 as the last three there, and 259 is the last three there, with the actual QR code that was written on that one, because we've been looking at the same device for the last few pictures here. So this would be the example of both how to mark one as a blank and then making sure that it's packaged with its other like material for the actual analysis period later. This is going to be a training video from SGS Galson. They're going to be going through the process of, again, just how to make a blank, what their purpose is, and just demonstrating one of the processes of how to complete that task.
Collecting field blanks appropriately protects you from unknown contamination of your media during your sample collection, storage, and transport processes. Contamination could cause your sample results to be reported higher than they should be. Obviously, it is not your intent to introduce any contamination to your sampling media. If you knew contamination was present, you would eliminate it. The field blank is to identify inadvertent contamination during handling, storage, and transport. So, it is important that the field blank media always accompanies the sample media except for during actual sampling. At minimum, you should collect the number of field blanks required by the written sampling and analytical method. To generate defensible data, it is important to collect a field blank for each analyte and each sampling event. So, let's say you order 30 sorbent tubes to sample for toluene over a 1-week period. You collect 6 8-hour samples on each of 5 days, Monday through Friday. That is 5 sampling events. You should provide a field blank for each day you sampled or each event. If instead you took 3 4-hour toluene samples each day, you would need 2 field blanks for each day. That would be a total of 10 field blanks to send in with your samples. A field blank is handled in the same way as your samples: open, seal, store, transport, except during the actual sample period. Do not draw any air through the field blank media. As you are preparing your sample media to begin monitoring, handle the field blank at the same time and in exactly the same way. First, make sure you mark the media as a field blank. You can do this right on the media label or mark the media with your standard label number and identify it on the chain of custody form as a field blank. Open the field blank media just as you would the sample media. If it is a cassette, remove the plugs or nibs, or open the cassette just like the sample media. If it is a sorbent tube, score it and break it open on each end. Use the same tool you use for the sample media. If it is a badge, open the container and remove it. If there is any contamination in the air, on the tool, or on your hands, it should equally affect both pieces of media. Field blank media should always be sealed in the field, just after you place the media on the worker or in the area to be monitored. Store the field blank and sample media together during the entire storage period and always ship the media in the same container. Again, it is important that both types of media have experienced identical environments up to the point of reaching the laboratory. By carefully following these procedures, if contamination to the field blank media has occurred, you are more likely to be able to deduct the contamination amount from the sample media.
Questions? Contact SGS Galson by phone or IH live chat.
All right, so that just is a little bit of clarity there for the field blanks. So one of the last steps that you're going to be doing here in order to just verify that you're set up for test day is to check the calibration of each one of the pumps. So for that, you're going to need the actual calibration device. The one pictured here in the middle, that is the one of the manual ones, which is what we're going to demonstrate here. There's a digital version. Their function is almost exactly the same. You're also going to want the pump calibration sheet, and what you're specifically looking for here is both the targeted flow rate and what the pre-calibration rates were at. So what we're going to be doing here is, in the process of calibrating, we're going to match up that those serial numbers are indeed calibrated to the flow rate that we're wanting for the collection media that they're rated for. If you're needing to, use a small screw on the pumps that adjust the flow rates, and the end goal is to get them within 0.2 liters of the notated flow rate on the actual pump sheet. So here we have the actual, just a video here that's going to quickly demonstrate how to set up a pump for calibration here. We've got the pump with the battery switch exposed by having that, as long as the analog calibrator here. And you'll just need some section of vinyl tubing. So that vinyl tubing is going to connect to the intake port on the actual pump. You're going to want to make sure that there's a good secure fit on that. It should be like a self-biting where it doesn't need like a C-clamp. You can see that a little bit closer up there. And then finally, you're going to take the other end of that pump and you're going to attach that to the top brass fitting on the actual calibrator itself. So once that's all set up, then we'll be powering on the pump in order to check and verify that the calibration is correct. Again, that's a self-biting fitting, so you don't need any kind of like a C-clamp or anything beyond extra pressure. So from here, we turn on the pump and you can see that small little ball bearing that raised up there. That is what we are calibrating against. The way that you're going to read that is the centerline equator of that ball bearing. I think what's good to note here is if you can see the small ball bearing of the actual pump itself, it's showing quite a different value than what's actually on the calibrator. So what the person's doing is they're demonstrating lowering the pump value to around 1 liter to demonstrate how far off it is from the actual one equipped on the pump. So he's going to make the secondary adjustment to bring it back up to what the intended calibration was here. And this is just to specifically demonstrate why it is important that you verify this with the calibrator and not just specifically on the pump itself. So we have the main power switch on the left side there. Just above that is a small access port with a screw. There should be a small screwdriver that is provided by SGS Galson. Those are complimentary, you can keep them. And then you can use that to adjust your flow rate. So what he's going to do is reinsert the screwdriver and then just turn the pump back up. And we're going to get to the desired kind of end state, which I believe is going to be 2 liters. And the nice thing being here is that this is almost an instantaneous adjustment. So the calibration goes quite quickly. And again, the equator line of that ball bearing is sitting right at 2. And you're going to repeat that for each one of your pumps, matching it up with the intended flow rate that was shown on the pump inventory sheet. So if it's 2, 2.5, 1, it should also be noted that at very low values, it can be very difficult to tell if the pump is on. They are quite quiet when they're at low flow rates. The other thing that you might see is a fault light. So if you see a red LED that starts to pump and or the pump has turned off, but the power switch is on, that is usually due to a restricted airflow. You're going to want to make sure that your lines aren't kinked at all, because if there's too high of a restricted airflow, the pump will just automatically shut down. This can be both important for the calibration step as well as when you're just monitoring during test day. As you're going around to check, that's one of the other reasons that we need to check, is if those lines get inadvertently kinked, the pumps will shut down and we're losing testing time, which is why we need to periodically check on those. In order to fix it, all you need to do is fix the kink, turn the pump off, turn the pump back on. Now that all the equipment is prepped, we're going to prepare the data collection sheets. Remember, those were the ones that we are taking out of the reference library within the technician portal. So those are used to just kind of like take notes and assist both the industrial hygienist as well as someone who wasn't there that day to just be able to gain a better picture of what was happening kind of at that one site. You do not need to do one of these for the blank. The blank is obvious. But we do need to do one for each device that is going to be on a tested person. And I believe we've talked about this, but you can have more than one device on the same person. So you could have a data collection sheet that would be for Joe Smith on several devices. So Joe Smith's name might pop up multiple times on the collection sheets. That is normal. These are more to track the devices themselves, not the person who is wearing them. So here we can actually see the data collection sheet here. I'm gonna bring your attention immediately to the monitoring type, which is that second row. In most instances, we are going to prefer that a person is wearing the monitor. There is two exceptions to that. One is if the sampling plan that you're provided explicitly states that we are going to be taking an area sample. An area sample just has you setting up the pump in an area. Similar to the idea of like setting up a sound level meter for an environmental noise level survey. It just allows you to take a passive reading of a room. The preference is going to be wearing a person. If on the day of testing, when you talk to like a point of contact and they're saying, oh, Jimmy didn't come in today. In that case, in order to try to like save the testing day, what we're going to want you to do is call the VP of Operations, which is Dan Ochoa, and just basically explain the situation and verify that it is okay to either do the area sample or if we need to reschedule. So the survey ID, that's just going to be the name of where you're at. So the example that we're going to be using for the majority of the day is going to be K&N filters. So the name of the location for the survey ID is going to be K&N filters. The survey location is going to be the actual area being monitored. For this example, we're going to call out the paint booth. The sampled by is me, so that's Mr. Robbins. The sample date would be whatever the day of testing is going to be. The sample ID is going to be the serial number of your device. So that is the 25 hyphen a bunch of numbers with eventually that'll be updated to the name that we're going to talk about here in the future here for the full serial number. Start and end time is very obvious there. It's just when did you start, when did you stop? And the overall sample time is just, how many hours were you there for the day. Same for the pump. We're just grabbing the serial number off of that. With the calibration pre and post, those should be within 0.2 of what the pump inventory sheet kind of called out there. With the sample volume, again, being just pulled off of that other sheet and then verified with the calibration. The collection media, it can be found on the chain of custody. It's whatever the target contaminant is. So that's going to be things like carbon black, resveratrol dust, isopropyl alcohol, things like that. When you're actually on the day of test, you're just going to be filling in the information that kind of helps draw the picture of who was wearing that and what they were doing. So in this case, John Smith was wearing this one. We don't necessarily need his employee ID, but we do need to know that he's a painter, and he works in the clear coat booth, which is operated for only a few hours out of the entire workday. The activities being performed here would just be, painting and prep of materials of various types and make. Any of the controls in place would be like he's wearing a PAPR and a Tyvek suit, or if they have, a filtering exhaust system that pulls those contaminants out, those are the kinds of notes we would put there. Recommendations is not something that you'll need to be doing unless there's just like a glaringly obvious one. But for the most part, that last box can be ignored. So now that we're actually on the day of testing, it is important that you show up 30 minutes prior to the start of the worker's shift. We talked about this earlier with the point of contact pre-call, that you need to verify the actual shift of the workers that are being monitored there, not the start time that is shown in the calendar. Those sometimes do not agree. We have to be there for the worker's shift, not necessarily the shift that's being shown. So we need to confirm that and then show up 30 minutes prior to the start of the worker's shift. It is important that we capture the entirety of that shift. There is no aside for this. We have to cover the entirety of the time that they are at work, because more often than not, the cleanup and during the beginning and end of the day to set them up for work is oftentimes the dirtiest portion of the day. So it's extremely paramount that we are capturing the beginning and end of that shift as well as the end. Once you're actually on site there, you're just going to unpack and set up all of the pumps with the monitors that they've been married to the previous day. So if you followed along with the serial number annotation method, you're just going to take whatever serial number is written on the pump, match it up with that cassette or analyte, and you're pretty much ready to go. So from there, you're going to go out to the floor, meet with whatever worker is going to be wearing that, and you're just going to collect their name and the break schedule, and just kind of have a short interview with what they're going to be doing there. So if you have any questions on how to set those up for testing, again, you can refer to the quick start guide that was provided by SGS Galson. One of the things to note here when setting up a monitor is that, again, a lot of these vary slightly depending on the kind of monitor that you're being used. You'll always want to defer back to the quick start guide to ensure that you're following the best practice for the kinds of collection media that you're going to be using, whether that's going to be one of these cassettes with the wagon wheel pattern, a badge style canister, what have you. So we're going to take a look at this video from SGS Galson here regarding how to set up the monitor, in this case specifically for a cassette.
To begin sampling, remove the two colored nibs from each end of the cassette. Attach the filter media to the pump with the wagon wheel pattern of the filter attached to the pump tubing. Then, attach the pump to the worker's belt or pocket, either in back or on the side. Bring the tubing up and around their back. Use the tubing clip to attach the tubing in place along the To begin sampling, remove the two colored nibs from each end of the cassette. Attach the filter media to the pump with the wagon wheel pattern of the filter attached to the pump tubing. Then, attach the pump to the worker's belt or pocket, either in back or on the side. Bring the tubing up and around their back. Use the tubing clip to attach the tubing in place along the shirt to restrict its movement. Attach the filter to the shirt collar. Turn on the pump and record the time to the minute that you started the pump. The counter records the minutes the pump is operating and should read 0 when you start the test. Remember, a field blank should be collected for each sample set and should accompany the monitor during all periods except actual sampling. For more detailed information, watch the Galson Field Blanks instructional video. After sampling is complete, turn off the pump, record the time, remove the equipment, and perform a post-calibration, preferably in an area with the same approximate temperature as was used during the pre-calibration. Then, record the flow rate on the pump calibration sheet. Reinstall the nibs on each end of the cassettes and place the cassettes in the Ziploc bag for shipment to Galson Laboratories. Then, complete the chain of custody form. It is important that you include all the information requested in order to ensure the
So a few things to note there. One, a vest can be provided that will house multiple pumps in a much more ergonomical way. If that has been provided, I would highly suggest that you use that vest. If it's not available, one of the things that we should be talking about with the point of contact when we are reaching out initially prior to test day is to remind the employees that are going to be wearing it, they need to be wearing a belt. We've been on a couple where somebody was wearing like sweatpants, and that was not a fun day for them. So the vest is preferred. Those will usually be ordered if for some reason it's not there, or we just have too many people that are going to be needing those where we're not able to provide a vest for everyone, then they can just be clipped to a belt. The other thing there is with the paper chain of custody form, that does not necessarily need to be filled out in full. We're going to be talking about the digital chain of custody form here. Now, for our purposes, the paper chain of custody form at the end of the work order will be photographed and placed in the technician data file folder for quick review in case there's a question that SGS has for corporate. They're able to quickly refer to your papered sheet. So prior to sealing it to return, snap a picture of that for uploading into your file folder. Thank you. Once the equipment has been set up on the individual person, and we did talk about this just slightly earlier, we're going to collect the first and last name of any person wearing a pump, regardless of how many pumps they might be wearing. So that is going to be annotated on the serial number of the devices that that person was wearing later. So you need to get the first and last name of any person who's wearing any of the monitors, whether that be 1 or 1,000. So a single person can be wearing more than one pump at any given time. So in this case, we've had somebody who was monitoring all simultaneously in their workspace for respirable dust, inhalable metal, H2S, and alcohol, which would be a pretty interesting place to work, but that is possible. You're also going to want to ask for their break schedule. The break schedule is the minimum number of times that you're going to want to go and check on that equipment. These are considerably heavier and bulkier than a dosimeter. People really love taking them off. I would highly recommend that every hour or so you go out and check on the equipment, but at a minimum, they need to be checked on during the break schedule for those employees. Once you're talking with them, ask about their roles and responsibilities. This is kind of helpful as far as just kind of understanding the process of what they're doing in order for the CIH to generate the end report, and can be annotated on the individual data sheets for those monitors. I would recommend, or for me, I take my notes in an initial notebook, and then I go back and add those to the data sheets afterwards. And again, once those are all the way completed, they're just going to be scanned and uploaded into your technician data file folder. So once we have the names of the people who are wearing those, we're going to update the serial numbers on our paper chain of custody form. So example, if we had the serial number 23 TAC and a bunch of numbers, that would now become 23 TAC, a bunch of numbers, TAC, the last name of the person. In this case, Robbins. It's very similar to how a blank is notated, but instead of the word blank, it's the last person, or it's the last name of the person. You're going to notate the start and the end times, again, down to the minute. There's no rounding here. So that will be important for the flow calculations that we're going to talk about on the digital chain of custody form. And then once we are all set up, you're going to want to make sure that you retain all of the plugs and packing material. Those are not necessarily disposable. A lot of those are used to reseal the media once you're done in order to package it for return to the lab. That should be notated in each one of the quick start guides. But as you saw in the previous video, the plugs for the cassette were retained and then used to reseal the air intake ports on that cassette. That will be very similar for almost every single analyte, cassette, or collection media that you will be using to complete this work order. Once you get to the end of the day and need to start collecting all of the equipment, first you're just going to go remove all of the pumps from everybody that was wearing one, turn the pump off, and I usually like to return to a central area where I can kind of collect and package everything for shipment. So power off the pumps, remove it from the workers, and then we're going to go back to that area, and on any piece of the equipment we are now going to process and package them for shipping. So we're going to replace any of the plugs, caps, plastic, bag and tag, any of those pieces of material so they can be set up. Each similar monitoring type is going to be packaged together. So respirable dust cassettes are going to be bagged in the same bag with other respirable dust cassettes. The isopropyl badge is going to be bagged with any of the other isopropyl, and they stay separate, but in their same bag. Once each of those are packaged and ready to go, all of those bags of the different monitors are then placed in the samples for analysis red bag that SGS Galson provided. Think of that like your inventory sheet for processing. So if in this case we were packaging a piece of evidence, we would be putting it in the processing bag for analysis and then putting that into the actual locker for shipment out to the lab in the same way that you would for most property inventory processes here. If for some reason you have an unused sample media, then that can be placed in the other bag. Those will then be placed back into the tackle boxes or tool boxes that SGS Galson had sent out and prepared for shipping back to the lab. And we're going to talk about how to prep the digital chain of custody form in doing that. The return labels should be provided. So what's kind of nice here is everything that was shipped to you is pretty much shipped back, very similar to like a Rayco rental. It's just important that you sort them out, keep them grouped together in their similar types, and ensure that anything that needs to be testing is placed in the proper bag so it's marked for analysis. Once all of that is done here, we're going to log on to sgsgalson.com and then you're going to navigate over to the login for customer login there so we can get to a portal. The intended purpose there is we're going to be transferring the notes from the paper chain of custody to the digital form. So the video that we're about to watch here is going to show the digital chain of custody sheet. It was commentated by Dave from a parallel universe, so we'll just listen to Dave with a slightly worse mic explain how to do this process.
So this is going to just kind of orientate to the digital chain of custody sheet that you'll find on SGS Galson. You'll see the website here, sgsgalson.com. That's the home site. If you want to add login to the end of it, that'll just bring you to the next page, or you can click the client login here at the top. You'll be provided like a standard login here. I've been using Dan's just kind of for the example here. But when you guys are on your own work order, you should have a unique login. If for some reason you have not received that yet, just get in contact with me or Dan, and we'll be able to get you logged in there. So once you get to the actual next page, you're going to navigate down here to the online chain of custody. The online chain of custody is really just the same thing as the paper form, but what it's going to be used for is just so we don't have to mail in that piece of paper. We still can, but it's not as required because there's just the digital form here. The first page that you're going to see is every work order that we have had in air monitoring with. You can see that the actual COC number has a unique identifier with a prep ID, so you can kind of match those up with the chain of custody form that was sent over to you. I'm going to look at the last one that I did, which is the K&N filters here. So in that, all we need to do is just move over to edit here, and that's where we'll be able to just pretty much see. We're just going to go box by box. So in filling out the accounts and billing, we're always just going to be using our own, which is mobile health diagnostics. It's the only option, so hard to mess that one up. No need to do a PO number. We're going to be using the credit card on file. You do not need to put anything in the last digits, so that can be left blank. As far as the invoicing and report, these are the only options. So we're going to be using the mobile health to Mr. Dan Ochoa here on both. So just make those match up, and we're on to the next one here. So we'll scroll to the bottom and hit next. For the submittal location, we use Syracuse. So there are multiple options here unless you've otherwise been directed, but you're always going to default to the 6601 Kirkville Road, East Syracuse option. That is where we send our stuff for analysis. As far as the turnaround time information, we're always going to be using the standard. So again, unless you've been directed otherwise, this is the only box that we're going to be checking here. As you can see, there's no surcharge for the processing there, and their lab processes things pretty quick. So always standard. For collection info, we're just annotating the information about the business. So in this case, this is the Grand Prairie location of K&N Filters. They have more than one, so we do need to specify which one it is. The project is just going to match the site name, so they should be about the same. You don't have to annotate that it's a different site. So here we just have K&N. Who it was sampled by, this is just going to be whoever sampled it. So in this case, it was Dan. For the general comments, that's the actual, like, what do they do at that business? So they make engine filters, really good ones. From there, the list of description of the stuff that we're going to be actually monitoring. So this is more of like the specifics of why we are there. So in this case, it's going to be, you know, they do painting, clear coating, powder coating, metal components, air filter systems. So those are kind of just some of the processes that they were doing that day that we were monitoring there. And then you're just, what state are you in? It was Texas. As far as the OEL info, this is what's called the exposure limits. So we're just looking at what governing body is going to decide what limitations that we're up against here. These are the defaults that we're always going to choose: OSHA, ACGIH, and Cal OSHA. If we're doing a mine or a place that is subject to MSHA, then we would do MSHA. And that should be specified in the work order notes or the sampling plan. If you have a question on it, again, you can just call me or Dan, and we'll give you the answer. The sampling info is the one that's going to be taking probably the longest period of time. This is where we're going to be moving over every serial number from the devices that were monitored. So a lot of them should be pre-populated, but they'll be showing as like blank, or where it's, click to add information here. You can also do that from down here below where it says add another sample. Now, like we've been talking about, there's two different kinds of monitors that we'll have. We'll have the blank, and then we'll have the one that was actually used. We'll go over the blanks first. So you can see I've got the blank highlighted right now here. The 23 TAC number, that is your serial number. So that is kind of what we've been referencing, where it's the 23 TAC 0089627. That, I believe, was for respirable dust. So we just had to create a control specifically for that. As you can see, it was annotated as such with blank, and then we checked the box, sample as a blank. Now what that does is it's going to autofill the NAs into the applicable areas, and we have the date sampled as whatever date that we created that blank. At the bottom, the collection medium and analysis requested and the method reference, all of these can be pulled directly from the paper chain of custody. So all of this is more of a verification than it is actually knowing the answer. So you can just pull these pieces of information directly off of the chain of custody. A lot of it will, again, be pre-filled, but if it's not, you can always defer to the paper chain of custody where you can just pull that information right there for it. Let's take a look at one of the samples that was actually on a person. So again, we have the serial number here where it's the 23 TAC 0089628, and this is the last name of the person that was wearing that pump. This will go along with the data sheet that has kind of the applicable notes for who this person is and what they were doing. But this is how we are going to show that in the chain of custody. The date sampled was the same date here. Obviously it was not a blank and it's not a bulk sample, so neither of those will need to be checked here. The next step that you're going to need to do here is hit this calculator. This calculator is going to do most of the rest of the work for you. So you're going to have your start time and your end time. You can use the calendar in order to preload that. And that's going to provide you the total minutes sampled. All you need to do for the flow rate is pull that off of the pump inventory sheet. So the pump inventory sheet had the suggested flow rate for that media monitoring material, and you're just going to put that number into the flow rate. And what that is going to do is it's going to give you your calculated air volume, which is one of the required pieces. So we could go over the math of how to do this manually, but I'm almost entirely sure no one wants to learn how to do that. So we'll just use the calculator and then save calculation as sample. From there, you'll just repeat that for every single piece. This is a good example down here. This was an area sample that needed to be done. It was not being worn by a person. So in shorthand, we wrote clear coat because it was being placed in the clear coat area. And then we just repeated all of the same processes in order to get the final numbers. So once all of those are done, then we'll go over to the authorization, which is relinquished by you because you're going to be sending it on the date and the time, and then sign this COC electronically. That is how you finish off on that. So then you'll just finalize and then hit finalize here. And then after that, you're going to be pretty much good to go. The only other step that you'll need to do from there is actually ship the materials in the box so they can be analyzed. And then we'll go over in the next few slides here what will need to be done as far as the remaining uploads to the tech portal.
Thanks, Alternate Universe Dave. That was pretty thorough. For files that need to be uploaded into the technician data file folder here, some of the the high notes here are going to be any of those data collection sheets, so we can take pictures of those or scan those in and add those into the file folder, as well as a copy of the paper chain of custody. So we're going to be doing both of those. If there's a paper report, that would be for something like a P-track, which is a separate auxiliary device that you would use in order to take like an ambient count of particles inside of a room. If those are there, you're probably going to need to have a meeting with either myself or Dan in order to kind of get orientated to some of those ones. They're a lot more rare for those to get sent out for monitoring. So if there's something that hasn't really been expressly covered here, the main default is going to be to either get me, Mr. Robbins, or Mr. Ochoa involved, so we can get you orientated to those. If you took any pictures, those can be uploaded, as well as the shipping receipt to just verify, yep, those were shipped, and they have a verified tracking number that goes along with them, so that if there's any kind of an issue, we can kind of point out, yep, those were shipped, either they were lost in the mail or something terrible happened. But those items will all be uploaded in the data file folder, and from there, you're just going to notify operations. And that's about all there is. So once you've notified operations and uploaded everything to the tech file and making sure that it's all synced up, you're pretty much good to go. So if you are on one of these and you run into a question, there's a couple of different resources here. Obviously, you can go back to either our quick start guide for the overall process, or this video for anything that you have a question on. There's also the quick start guides that were provided by SGS Galson. SGS Galson also has a pretty robust YouTube page that has the training videos that show pretty much how to set up, calibrate, or mark any of their equipment that they provide, up to and including any of those auxiliary devices like the P-track. So if you're seeing those or you have a question, you can always call myself, Mr. Robbins, or Dan for any direction that you might need help with in the field. But other than that, thank you. This has been another training from Mobile Health Diagnostics, and have a great day.